Okay, thank you, Andrew. Hi, as Andrew mentioned, I'm Glenn Irvine. I'm the Head of Cloud and Emerging Technologies at Dialog Information Technology. And today I'd like to introduce the Transformative Cloud Collaboration Maturity Model. Now, our practice with cloud and emerging technologies assists a lot of customers with their collaboration environment and moving them to the cloud. So we've done this with a number of our customers. We've had the experience over the last 8 years or so, and we'd like to share some of our thoughts and our approaches around enhancing the maturity of your collaboration environment at your organisation and look at the business benefits of doing that. Here's the maturity model, and we're looking at a 3-stage process across 5 different streams. We'll go through these quickly, but we are looking at things like productivity, communications across the organisation, the workflows, security, and the workspace itself. And we'll touch on each of those as we go through the maturity model itself. So what's largely brought us here? Well, one thing that we've certainly looked at is this compelling event around the pandemic and the need for organisations to work at home. As the statement on your screen says, we've been forced in the world's largest work from home experiment. And it's a lot of organisations that have had to implement something to meet the requirement there. Interestingly, some of the recent research done by Gartner in their HR survey suggests that 41% of employees are likely to remotely work at least for some of the time post the pandemic. So there's been this realization that some employees either can work better or at least a bit more productive in cases working from home, and that there's some other saves as well. The Gartner CFO survey revealed that 74% of CFOs intend to shift some of their employees to remote work permanently going forward. They've identified cost saves, particularly on premises, around this mode of operation. And one of the last things that we looked at as well is the readiness of some organisations around this shift. So what we did find is that only 54% believe their firms have the technology resources to support working from home. That means nearly half of employees felt that they were underserved in the sense of the technology supporting that work and whether or not they could be productive from home. So that means there's a fair gap for a lot of organisations in being able to meet the need to do work from home, or at least to be more mobile and perhaps even more global in their operations. This area and what we're dealing with from a collaborative maturity perspective touches on a number of domains. And to enable telework and corporate mobility without compromise, some of the things that we need to touch are this shift that we see with organisations these days moving to a zero trust network. In simple terms, that is moving from where just being inside the office means you can access that system to wherever you are, whether it's in the office, whether it's at home, or whether it's in an airport lounge, you have an authentication protocol to go through to be able to access your organisation's data. We want to look at enabling user productivity, whether that's with cloud and or virtualized desktops. That's another clear area. We also found that during the recent pandemic, one of the biggest issues some organizations found was that their contact centers were much reduced in their capability simply because those contact centers were built into the premises. And effectively, the best they could do is just forward those calls on to private numbers or mobiles in some cases, which means you lose a lot of the functionality around the contact center and the controls in that. Workflow support of distributed processes also came up. So that simple signature on a form, for instance, and being able to manage that in a distributed way and enabling the mobility of your workflow that way. We also had remote access to the corporate infrastructure issues. So being able to get that VPN operational and functional and also performant, all of those were important. Looking at things like the validation of endpoint workstations in a consumer setting, the security of the devices people are using in their home. Technical enablement of a secure remote access is another thing where we're able to give those employees that enablement to access things from remote sites. And also the physical structure of where you're working. So the work hubs, or the idea of work hubs, and establishing work or homework baselines and the policies and procedures that go with that. And obviously, If we're going to look at globalization and or mobility for an organization, the ability to work 24/7 or have an evergreen technology environment, all of that is touched by this as well. So let's look at the business benefits, the primary business benefits. Now we touched on there's 3 stages in the model, and what we're looking at here is that in that first stage, which for many organizations is their baseline, the main thing we're going to get is an increase in agility. So we're actually looking at taking things from being on-premise and moving them into the cloud, etc. And most organizations will start at this level right across the board. Many are still here. And in fact, as we saw, nearly half of the organizations out there could improve this process. Shifts to cloud provide that agility and the swift scaling that's needed, whether it's up or down, in a crisis like this. And all of that really matters. When we move into stage 2, we're talking about an increase in productivity. And that's the core issue that we get there. And if nowhere else, that's one of the main benefits organizations get, is to move into stage 2, get a cloud environment and an agile environment working, and really look at the benefits of enabling staff to operate, whether it's work from home or just to be able more mobile in their operations. Reducing silos and those unproductive restrictions of not being able to do something unless you're in the building, right? Obviously, mobility is a major benefit, and there are significant cost savings when we get to this stage. Finally, stage 3 is really an ideal place to be. That is where we get an increase in competitive capability. Agility and also speed to market really come at this stage. We're looking at having better executive visibility and the ability for our executive to nudge processes, to be able to move the organization in a new direction very rapidly. And this is how we lead to market leadership and market dominance. So let's have a look at the streams. First of all, there is productivity, and that's probably one of the key ones. These are the provision of productivity tools. In the communications area, we're looking at both telephony and also unified comms. And then we move into things like the workflow stage, where we look at how work is moved around the organization and how that will operate if you are moving into more mobile operations. What comes behind all of this is to ensure that we maintain security and that we don't increase the risk that we have around cybersecurity with our organization by increasing mobility and access to our data. And finally, the physical aspect of it. What are we doing in the workspace itself to enable collaboration, and what will help us work there, and what benefits can we gain? So let's look at the 3 stages. And one of the best things we can do here is provide a bit of a metaphor, really. And that is to look at the animal kingdom and the way that they operate. So we're likening level 1 as the same as a colony of ants, all very much productive in their individual way, but not much collaboration going on. Everyone is out there beetling around doing their own thing. We ideally want to move then up to more like a beehive, where you have bees that identify where the pollen is and then advise the others, and then they go out, and it's all very efficient. A much more efficient organization working together from that level. And then finally, moving up to that final level, a bit more like a murmur of swallows. If you watch them moving around and moving in unison, so that the whole organization can pivot quickly, can adapt very quickly to the environment, and be able to make the best of that. There's all of the 3 levels across it with some simple headings. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail. But clearly what we want to do is be able to make those step jumps between each of the levels on each of those streams as we go through. And that's certainly something that we can assist with. So let's look at each of those streams now. We're going to start with the productivity stream. With that, obviously, it's moving from very simple levels of productivity like using email and web chat, etc., right through the cloud enablement of an organization with the productivity tools they're used to using like word processors and spreadsheets, etc., and the introduction of things like workflow and integrated productivity. At the top level, we're starting to look at where AI enhances our productivity tools and assists users on a minute-by-minute, everyday kind of basis. Some of the key benefits that we gain at the productivity level are really about white-collar industries will benefit from this the most. And that is shifting those workers that are using the productivity tools to the more nimble cloud-based products as such. It also comes with it the need to look at your change management around that, because it's a significant impact on each of the users. Likewise, it's also necessary to get through some of the maturity stages here to get significant mobility in the organisation and to look at a BYO devices strategy and the cost saves that come from that. When we move on to communications, this is where we said a lot of organisations struggled during the recent crisis simply because they couldn't get their telephony off-premise. So we're looking at that shift across the corporate telephony being on-prem to cloud contact centres and cloud telephony, right through the introduction of soft phones, etc., and then moving up into the social media and omni-channel area, so that we have this universal view of our customer contact, whether or not it's by phone or by social media, through 20 or so different channels. The best benefit we get here are for those high client touch type organisations and those who are really responsive to reactive customer satisfaction. Likewise, industries where clients engage via social media significantly, particularly some retail industries, etc., need to attain stage 3. Omni-channel is king, and that's somewhere where you need to start looking. If we move on to the workflow stage, we're now talking about organisations that have, app-based workflows. So the app itself, like an ERP, has siloed workflow, right through where we have cloud workflow engines and things like robotic process automation, RPA, and the ability to bring in an RPA program in the organisation to automate a lot of our base processes, but also looking at things like our artificial intelligence and the support we have for that in the RPA processes and customer-centric workflow. Most organisations will benefit well from this stream. The waste reduction is significant if we start to get workflow squared away. Likewise, you might want to consider user-based workflow design platforms and tools, because there's an additional benefit that is gained there. In the security level, we're really taking an organisation from looking at their corporate security and establishing and getting that right through the zero trust stages and looking at data loss prevention, etc., where we're extending out into the client security side of things, where we're engaging with clients in a secure way, right through to full ecosystem security. This is where we bring in partners and vendors, etc., and have full life cycle management. And we start taking our security monitoring from just assessments right through full audits to eventually things like penetration tests, to make sure that we've got a very secure environment that we manage all of our collaboration and our corporate information access in general. It is important to know that one of the key benefits here will be to move your organisation to zero trust. That's a stage that, as I said, some of the leading tech companies in the world have all moved to, including your Googles, Amazons, Microsofts, etc. And you'll want to look at that because we need that to protect from many of the current security threats we're faced with today. And organisations with e-commerce channels must move to stage 3. You've really got to get to that level of maturity to really mitigate the risk that you have by offering e-commerce capability from your company. The next thing that we want to look at, and the final stream, is workspace. So what we're talking about is moving from office-specific or office-centric operations to that ability to have work-from-home initiatives with video meetings, etc., right through to global office. You operate from wherever you are with webinars, web-centric zero-trust devices, interactive boards, you name it. So right across that board, we're looking at being able to support our end users with the right environments for collaboration. And some of the benefits here will be what we see in the new normal, the cost saves from rationalising office spend, as we saw in those CFO surveys. And also the ability to support a BYO device approach and the cost saves from that as well. The plan for future fit outs and hubs versus looking at a central HQ for your organisation. So some of the considerations that you might see for your organisation are assessing your organisation's current state. So looking at your current state and looking where our desired end state might be going forward. We will provide a tool, and we'll talk about that shortly, that allows you to do a bit of a self-assessment up front. We want to be able to look at the step transformations, having done that baseline within each of the streams. And that comes down to that desired end state. Where do you need to be and what do you need to do across each one of those streams? We want to look at the scalability of your transformed cloud-centric organization. Can it scale up? Can it manage a new workload or new markets opening up for you in a nimble, agile way? Or, and likewise, can it scale down where required? There are a lot of organizations in the recent crisis that had to look at that aspect as well. Could they scale down their operational costs very rapidly? Interoperability and open APIs. When we're looking at the tools and the platforms that we bring in, this is a key issue that we need to look at. So we want to make sure that we are selecting products that are interoperable, that work across your ecosystem of technologies, but also have open APIs that you can extend upon where you might need to tweak some capability. A very keen and focused area that the executive need to look at is the change management required with a lot of these initiatives. It is key to success, and the executive support for that is also important. Obviously, executive visibility across all of these initiatives are quite important because it does impact the organisation and ultimately will be add to your business benefit and reduce costs. So how can Dialog assist you? Well, our maturity model assessment baseline and the executive consulting that we can provide hopefully can assist you with that sort of work as well. So we can guide you through some of those processes. We do have the ability to guide you through some vendor selection and market due diligence if you are looking for particular niche requirements and you're wondering what will work within your environment as well. We do provide point solution procurement and deployment. So we can actually assist with cloud-based collaboration technologies and enable them for you and guide you through that process. Each of the maturity stream step changes can be assisted with services support. So you could take a particular stream and make a step jump, and we'll actually guide you through that process with the initiatives, the training requirements, the change management, and the technology deployment as required. We can also assist with workflow, whether it's in the analysis, the deployment or development of it, and on those particular tools. And likewise, look at things like your security assessments and health checks to make sure the environment is squared away. We can also provide roadmap advisories, and we do that in our regular account management calls as well. Keep you across what's happening in the technology vendor space and what's coming down the track with a lot of their platforms. And there's the self-help evaluation tool for you to be able to look at the collaborative maturity of your organisation. You can go there, have a quick baseline, and with the results of that, one of the things you'll see is you'll look at what step changes you need to look at going forward. And that's where we can assist you with making each of those step changes as you work through, your specific requirements across those streams. There are our contact details. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can get us via that email address or via our website. Likewise, there's a phone number there that will direct you to us, and just ask for the cloud team. We'd be able to help you with any of those services. So that's my topic for today. I'd like to thank you very much for effectively watching what we did and what we talked about here. And I hope that it's been of some benefit to you, particularly if you're taking your organisation through this, your collaborative maturity. I'd like to open up now to any of your questions that you might have, and I'll throw back to Andrew to handle some of the Q&A. Thank you.